I'm Buster, 35, and just drove 4 hours through the worst snowstorm of the decade to surprise my family for Christmas. My hands are still shaking, not from the treacherous drive, but from what happened when my sister opened the door. After years of paying their mortgage, funding their lives, and being their safety net, I discovered exactly what they thought of me. That text from my brother-in-law changed everything. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to see how I finally stood up for myself. Growing up, our family was as close as they come. Mom and Dad raised us in a modest 3-bedroom house in Michigan, where we shared everything from clothes to secrets. My sister Megan was 3 years younger than me, with our brother Andy trailing behind by another 2 years. We fought like wildcats but defended each other like lions. If anyone picked on Andy at school, they'd have to answer to me. If someone broke Megan's heart, I was the first one plotting revenge while passing her tissues. That's just how we were, united. Everything changed 5 years ago, when Mom and Dad were killed in a head-on collision on Route 33. The other driver was texting, crossed the center line, and took them both instantly. We were thrown into grief and adult responsibilities simultaneously. And as the oldest, I naturally stepped into the caretaker role. Mom and Dad had left their house to all 3 of us, but I was the only one with a stable job. Megan had just married Jake, a charming guy who always seemed to be between jobs. Andy was finishing college and struggling with direction. It made sense for Megan and Jake to move into our parents' house while Andy took the basement apartment to save money. I had already established myself in Chicago with a good job in software development, so I stayed there but began sending money home. At first, it was just to help with the mortgage. Then it was property taxes. Then Jake's car broke down, and I helped with a new one. Andy needed tuition assistance. Megan lost her job and needed help with bills. Before I knew it, I was covering the mortgage, both car payments, utilities, and even their cell phone plans. Each month, nearly half my paycheck went to keeping my siblings afloat. I told myself it was temporary. They were grieving. They needed time to get on their feet. Mom and Dad would have wanted me to help, but months turned into years, and the financial support became expected rather than appreciated. My life in Chicago was comfortable but lonely. I worked 60-hour weeks at a tech firm, designing security systems for corporate clients. My apartment was nice, but rarely saw visitors. Dating was sporadic and unsuccessful, partly because I was always worried about money and family issues, partly because I was too exhausted to put myself out there consistently. The few friends I had often questioned why I sent so much money home. Your sister's husband could get a better job, they'd say. Or, Andy's been in school forever. Maybe he needs to focus. But I would defend my siblings, explain their struggles, and continue the monthly transfers. After all, they were all I had left. Over time, our communication patterns changed. Megan stopped calling just to chat, and only reached out when bills were due or something broke. Andy would text occasionally, usually when his bank account was low. Our holiday gatherings became shorter, with me driving in for the day and leaving that night to avoid missing work. I felt the distance growing but told myself it was natural. They had their lives there. I had mine in Chicago. Still, I supported them because they were family. This year had been particularly difficult. I received a promotion that came with more money but also more responsibility. Projects piled up, deadlines loomed, and I found myself working weekends and holidays. My boss noticed I seemed stressed and suggested I speak with the company's therapist as part of our wellness program. Initially reluctant, I eventually agreed to a few sessions. Dr. Patricia Walsh was gentle but direct. "Who takes care of you, Buster?" she asked in our second session. The question caught me off guard. No one, I realized. I was everyone's safety net, but I had none of my own. As Christmas approached, Dr. Walsh encouraged me to set boundaries and take care of my own needs. "You can't pour from an empty cup," she said. The sessions made me think about reconnecting with my siblings in a more meaningful way, not just as their financial backup. By some miracle, I finished a major project early, and my boss insisted I take the holidays off. "You've earned it," he said. "Completely disconnect. That's an order." With time on my hands, and a desire to reconnect, I decided to surprise my family for Christmas. We hadn't discussed holiday plans specifically, our texts had been brief lately, but Christmas was always spent at the family home. I imagined their faces lighting up when I arrived unexpectedly with thoughtful gifts and plans to stay for several days. We could rebuild what we'd lost, strengthen our bonds, and create new memories to honor Mom and Dad. It seemed perfect. It seemed necessary. It seemed like exactly what we all needed. I had no idea what was actually waiting for me. Planning the perfect surprise took more effort than I expected. I wanted everything to be special, to show them I cared about more than just providing financial support. I spent hours in high-end stores, selecting gifts that spoke to their personalities, not just their needs. For Megan, I chose a white gold necklace with a sapphire pendant that matched her eyes and reminded me of the one Mom used to wear on special occasions. She'd always admired it as a girl, running her fingers over it when Mom would let her hold it. The jeweler assured me it was exceptional quality, nearly $3,000 worth of exceptional, but seeing Megan's face would be worth every penny. For Jake, despite our somewhat distant relationship, I selected a luxury watch. He'd always check out my timepiece whenever we got together, commenting on how he'd have something similar when things turned around. Well, I decided things would turn around this Christmas, a $700 turn. Andy was easiest to shop for. My gaming-obsessed brother had been lamenting his outdated console for months in our sporadic text exchanges. The latest system with extra controllers and 5 games would surely bring back memories of our marathon gaming sessions as kids. With gifts wrapped and packed, I checked the weather forecast for my drive from Chicago to our hometown near Detroit. Light snow was predicted, nothing unusual for December in the Midwest. I had planned to fly originally, but the last-minute decision made tickets prohibitively expensive. The 8-hour drive would be worth it for the looks on their faces. The morning of my departure, a weather alert pinged on my phone. The light snow had been upgraded to a winter storm warning. Flights were already being canceled, and the interstate was expecting hazardous conditions by afternoon. My sensible side said to postpone, but something deeper pushed me forward. Perhaps it was the therapy sessions making me prioritize family connection, or maybe it was simple holiday sentimentality. Either way, I loaded my SUV with gifts and overnight bags, filled the tank, and headed east. The first 2 hours of driving were uneventful, with just light flurries decorating my windshield. I sang along to Christmas classics, imagining the warm reunion ahead. Around Indiana, however, the weather took a dramatic turn. Snow began falling in heavy sheets, reducing visibility to mere yards. The interstate slowed to a crawl, with hazard lights blinking ahead of me like warning beacons. My phone rang. It was Michael from work. "Buster, are you seeing this weather report? They're closing sections of I-94. "I'm already on it," I replied, gripping the steering wheel tighter as my car slid slightly, too committed to turn back now. "Man, your family better appreciate this. Be safe, okay? Will do. Merry Christmas." I should have recognized Michael's comment as prophetic. Near the Michigan border, conditions deteriorated further. My SUV slid off the shoulder twice, requiring careful maneuvering to return to the pavement. During a particularly bad stretch, I pulled off at a rest stop to regroup and check road conditions. The small building was packed with stranded travelers, all looking concerned. An elderly gentleman noticed me checking my phone and approached. "Heading far in this mess?" he asked. "About 2 more hours if the roads hold up," I replied. He nodded knowingly. "Must be someone special waiting." "My family. It's a surprise." His weathered face softened. "Then you be careful, son. Family's worth it, but not if you don't make it there in one piece." His concern touched me, and I promised to drive carefully. As I returned to my vehicle, I noticed the temperature had dropped further, turning the snow into treacherous ice. Still, I pressed on, motivated by thoughts of family reunions and making up for lost time. The final stretch of highway became a white-knuckle test of nerve. Twice I considered finding a hotel and continuing tomorrow, but the pull of home was too strong. I'd already driven this far. Just a little further, I told myself with each passing mile. When I finally exited the highway into my hometown, familiar landmarks were buried under snow. The water tower, the old movie theater, the park where we used to sled, all transformed into winter ghosts of themselves. The town felt both familiar and foreign, much like my relationship with my siblings had become. Main Street was deserted except for a few hardy souls hurrying between shops. I stopped at Walker's Gifts, a family-owned store that had been our go-to for last-minute presents since childhood, Mrs. Walker recognized me immediately. "Buster Adams, what on earth are you doing out in this storm?" "Surprising the family for Christmas," I explained, stomping snow from my boots. Her expression flickered with something I couldn't quite identify. "Well, that's nice. I'm sure they'll be surprised all right." I browsed the store, adding some small stocking stuffers to my collection. Local fudge for Megan, craft beer for Jake, and comic book collectibles for Andy Mrs. Walker wrapped everything with care, making small talk about the weather and asking about my life in Chicago. She conspicuously avoided mentioning my siblings, which struck me as odd given how small our town was. Everyone usually knew everyone else's business. Back in my car, I navigated the familiar turns toward our family home, excitement building with each block. The driveway came into view, and I was surprised to see it full of cars. At least 6 vehicles crowded the space and lined the street. My heart leapt. Perhaps they were having a Christmas Eve gathering with friends or extended family. My surprise would be even more special with others there to witness it. I parked a few houses down, gathered my courage and the first bag of gifts, and made my way through the snowy yard. Lights glowed warmly from every window, and I could hear laughter and music inside. The porch light illuminated the wreath on the door, the same one Mom had made years ago, still hanging faithfully each December. Taking a deep breath, I rang the doorbell and waited, a smile spreading across my face in anticipation. The door opened just enough for me to see my sister's face, and everything changed. Megan's expression shifted from annoyance to shock in an instant. Her eyes widened as she recognized me standing on the porch, snow collecting on my shoulders, gift bags in hand. The warm light from inside silhouetted her against the doorframe, but she made no move to open the door wider. "Buster?" she said, her voice a mixture of surprise and something else. "Alarm? What are you doing here?" "Surprise!" I exclaimed, my smile now feeling frozen to my face. "Thought I'd come home for Christmas this year. Properly, I mean. For the whole holiday." She glanced nervously over her shoulder, then back at me. The door remained barely cracked open, a thin slice of warmth in the frigid air. "Didn't you hear? We're keeping it small this year," she said with a smirk that didn't reach her eyes. "Just immediate family." The words hit me like a physical blow. I was immediate family. I was her brother. Behind her, I could hear multiple voices, laughter, the clinking of glasses. Christmas music played from the speakers I had bought them last year. "Oh," was all I managed to say, my voice suddenly small. I thought, since it's Christmas. Through the narrow opening, I caught glimpses of the living room, a fully decorated tree surrounded by presents. Our Aunt Karen's distinctive laugh rang out. Our cousin Tyler's voice called something about refilling drinks. I even spotted our elderly Uncle Paul shuffling past with a plate of food, not small at all, just without me. I stood there, snow melting down the back of my neck, waiting for Megan to realize her mistake, to open the door wide, to apologize for the confusion and welcome me in from the cold, to call out to the others that I had arrived, to sound happy about it. None of that happened. She continued to block the entrance, one hand on the doorframe, the other clutching the edge of the door, as if afraid I might try to push my way in. "Well," she finally said, "thanks for coming by. I'll tell everyone you said Merry Christmas." Still, I waited. Surely someone else would come to the door. Jake, Andy, anyone. But the seconds stretched into an unbearable silence between us, filled only with the muffled sounds of celebration inside. No one came. No one even seemed to notice that Megan was still at the door. Childhood memories flooded my mind. Christmases where we woke before dawn and piled onto our parents' bed, too excited to wait. Family dinners where we laughed until our sides hurt. The time I flew home from college just to surprise Megan for her birthday, and she had cried with happiness. When had that changed? When had I become an outsider? "Right," I said finally, my voice hollow. Merry Christmas. I turned without another word and walked back toward my car, the gift bag suddenly heavy in my hands. Behind me, I heard the decisive click of the door closing, shutting out the warmth, the music, the family I thought was mine. The walk back to my car felt endless. Each step sank into fresh snow, leaving a trail that would soon be covered, as if I had never been there at all. My cheeks burned despite the cold, humiliation, and hurt, creating a physical response I couldn't control. I fumbled with my keys, hands shaking from more than just the temperature. Inside the car, I sat motionless, staring at the house. Through the windows I could see shadows moving, people gathering in the living room. Someone was giving a toast. Everyone raised their glasses. Life continuing perfectly well without me. I started the engine but couldn't bring myself to drive away immediately. What had just happened felt so surreal that part of me needed to process it while looking at the evidence. The house I helped pay for. The lights I helped keep on. The gathering I wasn't welcome to join. 5 years of monthly transfers. 5 years of taking their calls whenever they needed something. 5 years of canceling my own plans when they had emergencies. 5 years of telling myself that family comes first. And this is what it amounted to. Standing in the snow, unwelcome, while they celebrated without me. I finally put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb. The nearest hotel was about 20 minutes away, and I focused on navigating the icy roads rather than the icy feeling spreading through my chest. I had no plan now, just the immediate need to find somewhere warm to regroup. The storm had intensified, making the short drive to the lakeside inn treacherous. I crept along at 15 miles per hour, hunched forward, straining to see through the swirling snow. My phone pinged with a message, and I ignored it until I pulled into the hotel parking lot. When I finally checked the notification, my hands went numb. It was from Jake, but clearly not meant for me. What a clown. He actually showed up. A second text followed immediately. Shit, wrong chat. Then nothing. No apology, no explanation. I stared at the phone, waiting for something more, but the screen remained unchanged. After a moment, I scrolled up through our previous conversations, mostly brief exchanges about house repairs I was funding or bills I was paying, but another notification appeared, a group chat I'd been accidentally included in. Jake, Megan, Andy, and a few other names. I tapped it open before I could think better of it. Megan, you guys won't believe who just showed up. Jake, bank account buster making a surprise appearance? Andy, no way. I thought he was too busy being important in Chicago. Jake, what a clown. He actually showed up. Megan, standing there with gifts like we're supposed to be grateful, after ghosting us all year. Andy, did you let him in? Megan, hell no. Told him we're keeping it small. Jake, while he can see cars everywhere, lol. Andy, savage, but he deserves it. Only calls when he wants to feel good about himself. Jake, as long as the check's clear, he can stand in the snow all night. I stopped reading, my vision blurring. Ghosting them? Only calling to feel good about myself? I was their lifeline, their safety net, their constant support. How had this become their perception? The last message from Jake caught my eye again. As long as the check's clear, he can stand in the snow all night. Something inside me, something that had been bending and stretching for years, finally snapped. I sat in the hotel parking lot as the engine idled and heat slowly filled the car. Snow continued to fall in heavy sheets, mirroring the cold heaviness settling in my chest. The phone in my hand seemed to burn with the messages I'd just read, irrefutable evidence of how my siblings truly viewed me. For the first time since my parents' death, I allowed myself to feel something beyond responsibility and obligation. Anger, hot and clarifying, burned through the numbness, not just at their rejection tonight, but at the years of taking without appreciation, of expecting without gratitude, of reducing me to nothing more than a financial resource. My eyes blurred, and I realized I was crying, not gentle tears, but the racking sobs of someone who has carried a weight too long and finally acknowledged its crushing presence. I hadn't cried like this since the funeral. Not even when Julia left me last year, saying she couldn't compete with my family obligations. Not even when I missed the promotion 2 years ago because I had to rush home when Jake crashed the car I was still making payments on. As the emotional storm subsided, a strange calm took its place. With mechanical precision, I began calculating exactly how much support I had provided over the years. The mortgage, $1,800, monthly for 5 years. Car payments, $700 monthly for Jake's truck, $500 for Andy's sedan. Credit cards, variable, but averaging around $1,200 monthly between the three of them. Utilities, insurance, phone plans, streaming services, emergency repairs, medical bills, the list went on. Conservatively, I had given them over $200,000. $200,000 of my life. Money that could have gone to my own home instead of an apartment, my own family instead of dating, disasters, retirement savings, vacations, a life. I scrolled through text messages from the past year, seeing the pattern with painful clarity. They reached out when bills were due or unexpected expenses arose. Conversations about my life were perfunctory at best, quickly redirected to their needs. Invitations to visit were rare and usually coincided with something breaking in the house. The realization was devastating. I wasn't family to them. I was an ATM with a pulse. My finger hovered over the banking app on my phone, the one that had faithfully transferred funds every month without fail, the one that held standing payment orders for their mortgage, utilities, car loans, and credit cards, the one that had prioritized their comfort over my security. I took a deep breath and opened it. One by one, I navigated to each recurring payment. The mortgage payment scheduled for the 1st of January. Canceled. Jake's truck payment due on the 5th. Canceled. Andy's car payment on the 7th. Canceled. Electric bill, water bill, gas bill, internet bill, all canceled. With each confirmation screen, a weight lifted. My finger trembled less. My breathing steadied. By the time I reached the credit card payments, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Freedom. The last payment canceled, I sat back and considered my next steps. The practical part of me knew I should communicate my decision, explain my reasoning, give them time to adjust. But the wounded part, the part still smarting from, what a clown. He actually showed up, wanted them to discover it themselves, to feel a fraction of the shock I had felt standing on that porch. I navigated to my email and composed a message to Franklin Morris, the family lawyer who had handled our parents' estate. I explained that I would no longer be contributing to the household expenses for the family home and requested that he prepare documentation to either sell my share of the property to my siblings or force a sale and division of proceeds. Next, I blocked their numbers, not permanently, but enough to give myself space to think without their inevitable calls once they discovered the financial changes. I would unblock them tomorrow, after I'd had time to process and prepare for the conversation. Finally, I drafted an email to all three of them. I stated clearly that I had seen their group chat and understood their true feelings. I explained that effective immediately, I would no longer be providing financial support of any kind. I outlined the steps they would need to take to assume responsibility for their own expenses. I kept the tone factual and unemotional, though my hands shook as I typed. My finger hovered over the send button, but something held me back. Perhaps they deserved to hear it from me directly rather than reading it. Perhaps I needed to see their reactions, to know that they understood the significance of what had happened. I saved the draft, and instead called the one person I knew would understand. Michael, it's Buster. I know it's Christmas Eve, but something happened. My work friend listened as I relayed the evening's events, offering supportive comments and appropriate outrage at all the right moments. You've done the right thing, he assured me. It's long overdue, honestly. They're adults, not your dependents. But what if they lose the house? What if they can't manage? The caretaker in me surfaced automatically. Then they'll figure it out, just like everyone else does. You didn't cause this situation, Buster. You're just stopping the enabling. Enabling. The word hit hard because Dr. Walsh had used it too. You're not helping them grow, she'd said. You're enabling their dependence. After hanging up, I checked into the hotel, upgrading to a suite because, for once, I could afford to prioritize my comfort. I ordered room service, took a long hot shower, and slipped between clean sheets. For the first time in years, I fell asleep without checking my account balances or worrying about upcoming expenses for people other than myself. The storm outside continued to rage, but inside, an unexpected peace had settled over me. Whatever tomorrow brought, I would face it with a new sense of self-worth and boundaries that had been missing for far too long. The insistent buzzing of my phone pulled me from the deepest sleep I'd had in months. Sunlight streamed through the hotel curtains I'd forgotten to close completely, reflecting off the fresh snow outside. For a moment, I felt disoriented. This wasn't my apartment in Chicago, nor was it my childhood bedroom in the family home. Reality crashed back as I reached for my phone and saw the notifications. 43 missed calls, 27 voicemails, 60+ text messages, all from 3 numbers I had blocked last night but unblocked this morning, anticipating exactly this deluge. I sat up, rubbed my eyes, and steeled myself before playing the first voicemail from Megan. "Please don't do this." Her voice trembled with an emotion I couldn't quite identify: fear, anger, or perhaps genuine regret. "Call me back immediately. We need to talk about whatever you think you're doing with the accounts." So they discovered the canceled payments already, faster than I expected. The next several messages followed a similar pattern, growing increasingly desperate or hostile depending on the sibling. Andy sounded confused and hurt. Jake alternated between threats and awkward attempts at reconciliation. The final voicemail, left at 4:37 in the morning, was from Megan again, but with a completely different tone. "Buster, I know you're angry about last night, and I don't blame you. We were awful, and there's no excuse. But please don't punish us like this. We can't manage without you. The mortgage company already called about the canceled payment. Please, let's talk this through." I set the phone down and walked to the window, looking out at the transformed landscape. The storm had passed, leaving a pristine blanket of snow over everything. Plows had cleared the main roads, and people were emerging to assess the damage and begin digging out. A perfect metaphor for my own situation, I thought. After showering and ordering breakfast, I finally responded with a text to all 3. "I'll call at noon. Be at the house." Their replies were immediate and varied from grateful to defensive, but I ignored them all. I needed time to gather my thoughts, to ensure I wouldn't cave at the first sign of remorse. Promptly at noon, I dialed Megan's number and asked her to put me on speaker so everyone could hear. "Buster, thank God," she began, her voice wavering. "We've been so worried. Where are you?" "At the Lakeside Inn," I replied flatly. "Where I went after being turned away last night." "About that," she continued quickly. "It was a terrible misunderstanding. We thought you were working through Christmas like last year, and when you suddenly appeared, I just panicked." "A misunderstanding?" I repeated, my voice carefully controlled. "So the group chat messages about me being a clown and only mattering for my checks clearing, those were misunderstandings too?" Silence on the other end. Then Jake's voice, lower than usual. "Look, those messages were out of line. We were just blowing off steam. You know how family can be." "No, Jake, I don't think I do know how family can be anymore. Because my understanding was that family supports each other in all ways, not just financially. That family includes each other in celebrations. That family expresses gratitude when help is given." "We're grateful," Andy interjected. "Of course we're grateful for everything you've done." "Are you? Because, from where I'm standing, it seems like you're only concerned now that the money has stopped." Megan's voice broke as she responded. "That's not fair. We love you. We've been under a lot of pressure, and sometimes we say things we don't mean." "So which part didn't you mean? Calling me a clown? Saying I only call when I want to feel good about myself? Or the part about me standing in the snow as long as the check's clear?" Another uncomfortable silence followed. "I found your messages by accident," I continued, "but they confirmed what I've suspected for a while. I'm not your brother anymore. I'm your bank. And last night made it clear that banks don't get invited to Christmas dinner." "That's not true," Megan protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "When was the last time any of you called just to check on me, to ask about my life, to invite me home without needing something fixed or paid?" No one answered. Jake finally broke the silence, his tone shifting from apologetic to confrontational. So what? You're just cutting us off? After everything we've been through? That's cold, man. No colder than standing on the porch last night, I replied evenly. What do you expect us to do? Andy asked, panic edging into his voice. The mortgage is due, and I've got tuition next month. I expect you to do what other adults do. Get jobs that cover your expenses, live within your means, make necessary sacrifices. We have jobs, Megan protested. Part-time jobs that don't cover your lifestyles, I corrected. Jake hasn't held a full-time position in 3 years. Andy has been in school switching majors for nearly 6 years. And you, Megan, cut your hours to pursue painting without ever selling a piece. So we're just supposed to struggle while you live comfortably in Chicago? Jake's voice had an ugly edge now. Yes, I said simply, because that's what I earned. That's what I worked 60-hour weeks for, what I sacrificed relationships for, what I put my life on hold for. I thought I was helping you through a rough patch after Mom and Dad died. I didn't sign up to fund your lifestyle choices indefinitely. Please, Megan's voice had turned tearful. We can work this out. Just reinstate the mortgage payment while we figure things out. The bank called, and they said if we miss even one payment with our history, they'll start foreclosure proceedings. I closed my eyes, fighting the automatic urge to solve their problems. That's not my responsibility anymore. You're just going to let us lose Mom and Dad's house? Andy asked incredulously. The question hit its mark, piercing through my newfound resolve. Our childhood home, the place where our parents had lived and loved and raised us, the last physical connection to them. But then I remembered something Dr. Walsh had said. Your parents wouldn't want any of their children sacrificing their future for a building. The house belongs to all 3 of us, I said finally. I've emailed Franklin Morris to sort out the legal details. Either you buy my share, or we sell it and split the proceeds. We can't afford to buy you out, Megan exclaimed. Then we sell. Jake's voice turned menacing. You'd really do that to us? Kick us out of our home? It's my home too, I reminded him, though you made it very clear last night that I'm not welcome in it. The conversation continued in circles, them alternating between guilt trips, anger, and desperate negotiations, me holding firmly to my decision. Eventually, I cut it short, promising to be in touch through Franklin about the house and other shared assets. As I ended the call, my phone immediately lit up with messages from extended family members. Word had spread quickly. Some expressed concern for my siblings, others surprised that I had been carrying them all this time. Aunt Karen, who had been at the gathering last night, sent a particularly thoughtful message, acknowledging that she'd had no idea of the financial arrangement and offering her support for my decision. Uncle Paul called directly, his gruff voice warmer than I remembered. Never knew you were footing the bills all these years, he said without preamble. Your father would have knocked some sense into those kids long ago. I was trying to help, I explained. Help is one thing. Being taken advantage of is another. He paused. Your mother always said you had her kind heart, but she also knew when to stand firm. The conversation with Uncle Paul lifted my spirits somewhat. At least some family members understood my position, saw the situation clearly. It made me feel less alone in my decision. By late afternoon, I had checked out of the hotel and was considering my next move. The roads had been cleared enough to make the drive back to Chicago possible, though challenging. Part of me wanted to flee back to the safety and distance of my apartment. Another part felt there was unfinished business here, conversations that needed to happen face to face. In the end, I decided to stay one more night in town, but at a different hotel farther from the family home. I needed to establish my independence, both financially and emotionally, and running away would only delay the inevitable confrontations. That evening, I scheduled another phone session with Dr. Walsh, who agreed to speak with me despite the holiday. You've taken a significant step, she affirmed after I recounted the events. Setting boundaries is difficult, especially with family, but it's essential for healthy relationships. I feel both terrible and relieved, I admitted. Is that normal? Completely normal, she assured me. You've been carrying a burden that was never entirely yours to bear. Putting it down feels freeing but also frightening because it's been part of your identity for so long. What if they never forgive me? That's a possibility you'll need to accept. But consider this. Relationships built on financial dependence aren't genuine connections. If they can only love you when you're paying their bills, is that the relationship you want? Her words resonated deeply, and after we hung up, I found myself writing in the hotel notepad, attempting to process the whirlwind of the past 24 hours. I documented my feelings, fears, and hopes, a practice Dr. Walsh had encouraged, but that I'd rarely made time for. For the first time since my parents' death, I allowed myself to consider my own future without the weight of supporting 3 additional households. What would I do with the extra income? Perhaps buy a house of my own? Take that international trip I'd always postponed? Invest in my retirement? Date without worrying about emergency calls for money? The possibilities stretched before me like the freshly plowed roads outside. Clear, open, full of potential. And for the first time in years, I felt something that had been missing for so long. Hope for my own future, not just concern for everyone else's. The next morning brought a flurry of activity from corners of the family I hadn't heard from in months. Word had spread through the family grapevine with impressive speed, creating factions and opinions where there had previously been disinterest. My phone buzzed with a call from Aunt Denise, my mother's sister who lived in Florida and rarely involved herself in family matters back north. "Buster, honey, is it true? You've been paying for everything for those kids since Sarah and Tom passed." I confirmed the basics without elaborating. She clicked her tongue disapprovingly. I always wondered how they maintained that lifestyle. Megan's Facebook is nothing but home renovations and vacations. We all assumed there was a substantial insurance payout or trust fund. "No," I said simply. "Just my monthly transfers." "And they excluded you from Christmas? After all that? Shameful." She paused. "You know, your mother would be heartbroken to see how they've treated you, but she'd be proud you finally stood up for yourself." Similar calls followed throughout the day. Uncle George expressed shock at my siblings' behavior. Cousin Tyler apologized for being at the house and not knowing I'd been turned away. Even my father's college roommate Ronald reached out, having somehow caught wind of the situation. Not all reactions were supportive. My mother's best friend Linda called to berate me for abandoning my siblings right after Christmas. Jake's parents suggested I was being vindictive and petty. A few distant relatives I barely knew sent messages implying I had a duty to continue supporting the family home as the oldest son. The mixed responses reinforced something Dr. Walsh had emphasized. I couldn't control how others perceived my actions, only ensure that my decisions aligned with my own values and well-being. Around midday, I received an unexpected call from a neighbor who lived across the street from the family home. Mrs. Winters had been there since before we were born, and had always kept an eye on us kids. "Thought you might want to know," she said without greeting. "There's quite a commotion at the house. Your sister and her husband appear to be having some kind of yard sale. In this weather, if you can believe it." Curious despite myself, I thanked her and drove past the house an hour later. Sure enough, the driveway and front yard were covered with items tagged for sale: furniture, electronics, artwork, even Jake's beloved motorcycle. A pang of guilt hit me as I watched from a distance, but it was quickly replaced by a realization. They were capable of taking action to address their financial situation. They had assets they could liquidate. They weren't helpless. They had simply found it easier to rely on me than to make difficult choices themselves. As I watched, a family friend named Trevor spotted my car and approached. Trevor had been my brother's roommate in college, and now worked as a financial advisor at a local bank. "Quite the fire sale," he commented, leaning down to my window. "Seems that way. Jake asked me to help them refinance the mortgage yesterday. When I looked at their finances, he shook his head. Buster, I had no idea you were keeping them afloat all this time. They've been living way beyond their means for years." "I'm learning that," I acknowledged. "For what it's worth, this might be the wake-up call they needed." Jake's already applied for 3 jobs this morning, actual full-time positions with benefits. Andy's talking about taking a break from classes to work. They're adjusting, even if it's painful. The news was both reassuring and validating. They could survive without my support. They had simply chosen not to while it was available. That evening, as I prepared to return to Chicago, I received a text from Andy, the first direct communication that wasn't accusatory or pleading. Found a job at Wilson's Hardware. Starting tomorrow. Not great money, but it's something. Just wanted you to know. I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Finally, I typed, "Proud of you. That's a good first step." His reply came quickly. "Thanks. Still mad at you, but I get it more than the others. I got comfortable letting you handle everything." It wasn't an apology, but it was something, an acknowledgement at least, of the dynamic that had developed. A tiny bridge across the chasm that had opened between us. The drive back to Chicago the next day felt symbolic, leaving behind not just my hometown but also the role I had played for too long. The roads were clear, the skies bright blue, the holiday traffic light. I rolled down the window despite the cold, feeling like I needed fresh air, a literal breath of freedom. As I crossed the state line into Illinois, my phone rang with a Chicago area code I didn't recognize. "Curious," I answered on Bluetooth. "Is this Buster Adams?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, speaking. This is Jenny Callahan from Milestone Travel. You inquired about our Patagonia hiking expedition a few years ago but never booked. We're offering past clients a significant discount on upcoming trips, and I wondered if you might be interested now." I laughed, startling myself with the sound. 2 years ago, I had researched the trip extensively, saving brochures and pricing information, even requesting time off work. Then Megan's roof had leaked, requiring expensive repairs, and I had put my plans aside indefinitely. "Actually," I said, surprising myself, "I think I would be interested. What dates are available?" As the agent enthusiastically detailed itineraries and accommodations, I felt a lightness in my chest. This was what moving forward looked like, making choices based on my own dreams rather than others' needs. The trip would use some of the money I had previously earmarked for my siblings' expenses, a concrete reallocation of resources toward my own well-being. By the time I reached my apartment in Chicago, I had tentatively booked a hiking expedition for March, my first real vacation in 5 years. The familiar surroundings of my living room seemed different somehow, as if my perception had shifted. What had once felt like a temporary space, a place to rest between family emergencies, now looked like the foundation of the life I could build for myself. I unpacked my bags, including the Christmas gifts I had never given. Megan's necklace, Jake's watch, Andy's gaming console, all reminders of a dynamic that had been unhealthy for everyone involved. After some consideration, I decided to return everything and use the refunds to furnish the apartment properly, perhaps even look for a condo to purchase. These walls could become a true home, not just a way station. That night, I made plans with local friends I had neglected, dinner dates, movie nights, a cooking class I had always wanted to try. I researched therapists in my area to continue the work Dr. Walsh had begun. I even updated my dating profile, inactive for months due to lack of time and energy. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be difficult conversations, legal complications regarding the house, and the emotional work of redefining relationships with my siblings. But for the first time in years, I was navigating by my own compass, rather than being pulled in directions others had determined for me. As I drifted off to sleep in my own bed, I realized that the greatest gift I had received this Christmas was one I had given myself, the permission to prioritize my own happiness and well-being. It was long overdue. 6 months after that fateful Christmas Eve, summer had transformed Chicago into a vibrant, sun-drenched playground. My life had undergone an equally dramatic transformation, barely resembling the existence I had known before. My apartment was gone, replaced by a modest but charming condo overlooking a neighborhood park. The walls displayed photographs from my Patagonia expedition, breathtaking landscapes that had challenged and healed me in equal measure. The furniture was new, chosen deliberately rather than accumulated haphazardly between work emergencies. This was no longer a place to crash between responsibilities. It was a home that reflected my personality and priorities. My social circle had expanded beyond work acquaintances to include neighbors, members of a hiking club, and fellow students from the photography class I had finally made time for. Weekends were filled with activities I had perpetually postponed: museum exhibitions, kayaking on Lake Michigan, cooking elaborate meals for new friends. Most surprising was Caroline, the landscape architect I had met at a community garden event. Our relationship was still new, just 3 months old, but it felt different from previous attempts at dating. With no family crises constantly pulling me away and no financial strain limiting our options, I could be fully present with her in a way I never had with anyone else. The journey with my siblings had been complicated, as expected. After the initial shock and anger, practical realities had forced significant changes in their lives. Megan and Jake had indeed been forced to sell the family home. The process had been painful and marked by attempts to extract additional support from me, but ultimately the sale had proceeded. They had downsized to a small apartment, and both worked full-time jobs now. Megan as an administrative assistant at the local school, Jake in construction. Their social media posts showed fewer vacations and restaurant meals, more home-cooked dinners and free community events. They weren't thriving, perhaps, but they were surviving independently. Andy had surprised everyone by thriving under the new circumstances. After taking a semester off to work, he had returned to school with a clear focus, switching from his 7th major to a practical program in computer networking. He worked part-time to cover his living expenses and had applied for scholarships to reduce his tuition burden. We spoke most frequently among my siblings, our conversations gradually evolving from awkward check-ins to something approaching the brotherly relationship we had once had. Communication with my family had settled into a new pattern. The first few months had been difficult, with attempts at manipulation giving way to reluctant acceptance. Some relatives took my siblings' side and cut contact with me. Others recognized the healthier dynamic that was developing and supported my boundaries. I had learned to accept both reactions without letting either define my worth. Franklin Morris had facilitated the legal separation of our finances and property, providing a neutral buffer during the most contentious discussions. The proceeds from the house sale had been divided equally, providing each sibling with a modest sum to establish their new living situations. I had used my portion to make the down payment on my condo, a decision that felt appropriate, transforming my share of our past into the foundation for my future. Physical distance remained between us, but small steps toward reconnection had begun. A birthday card from Megan, an invitation to Andy's end-of-term showcase, even a grudging text from Jake when he secured a promotion at work. None acknowledged the elephant in the room directly, but each represented a tiny bridge across the chasm that Christmas Eve had revealed. The most significant healing, however, had happened within me. Weekly therapy sessions had helped me understand the roots of my caretaking behavior, how I had equated financial support with love, how providing had become my primary identity, how fear of abandonment had kept me trapped in an unsustainable role. The irony, my therapist, Dr. Myers, had observed, is that by trying to prevent abandonment through financial support, you actually prevented genuine connection. Real relationships can't be purchased. Those words had resonated deeply, helping me recognize that the loneliness I had felt even before the Christmas incident wasn't because I was physically distant from my family, but because our entire relationship had been reduced to transactions. Money flowed one way, gratitude, increasingly scarce, flowed the other. Nothing authentic could grow in such infertile soil. On a warm Saturday in June, I found myself video chatting with Uncle Paul, who had become an unexpected source of wisdom during my healing process. "Your mother always said you had the heaviest sense of responsibility," he remarked. "Even as a kid, you took everything on your shoulders, but she worried sometimes that you'd carry so much for others that you'd have nothing left for yourself." "I think that's exactly what happened," I admitted. He nodded. "Sarah would be proud of you now, son. Not just for helping when it was needed, but for knowing when to stop. That's wisdom." "I still feel guilty sometimes," I confessed. "Like I abandoned them." "Teaching someone to stand on their own isn't abandonment," he countered. "It's respect. You're treating them like capable adults, not helpless children. That's a gift, even if they don't see it yet." His perspective helped quiet the nagging voice that occasionally questioned my decision. The truth was, my siblings were managing, not in the lifestyle they had grown accustomed to, but in a sustainable way that fostered independence rather than dependence. In some ways, they were healthier now than when I had been enabling their financial irresponsibility. The most profound lesson from the whole experience was one I continued to apply daily. True generosity means giving without diminishing yourself. For years I had given from depletion, draining my own resources, financial, emotional, and temporal, until there was barely enough left to sustain me. That wasn't generosity. It was self-destruction, disguised as virtue. Now I practiced a different approach. I gave from abundance, sharing my time, energy, and yes, sometimes money, but only after ensuring my own needs were met. This allowed me to give joyfully, rather than resentfully, to help without keeping score, and to say no without guilt when necessary. Would our family ever fully heal from the rupture that Christmas revealed? I couldn't say for certain, but I knew that whatever relationship we rebuilt would be healthier than what we had before, based on mutual respect rather than financial dependency, on genuine affection rather than obligation, on choice rather than coercion. The journey had been painful, but necessary. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop doing what harms both of you, even when that feels like abandonment in the moment. Sometimes the hardest storms bring the greatest clarity, and sometimes, standing in the snow alone is the first step toward finding your way home, not to a physical house, but to yourself. Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with someone you love? How did it change your relationship? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to see more content about family dynamics and personal growth, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to prioritize their own well-being. Thanks for watching, and remember, the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one with yourself.